This is Scott Freeman recording Space Shuttle Columbia's first shuttle flight ever, April 10th, 1981, launch time 4:50 Arizona time.
The number 3 fuel cell has been determined to be satisfactory at this time, and it appears that we will be able to go ahead with the countdown from the standpoint of the fuel cells. However, we are still in the process of working the problem with the backup flight software. That software has been dumped and is being compared by the engineers at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. We're standing by to hear whether that comparison is satisfactory and whether or not we can pick up the countdown in the next few minutes. Both the commander of John Young and pilot Bob Crippen are involved in this process of comparing up the flight program. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
Well, very complicated talk by some very contemporary people. Now, you not only have to be able to fly the thing, you've got to know all that computer lingo because the computers are terribly important. And while they're examining that, no launch on time today, but perhaps launch later this morning. We'll be back after these messages.
Oh, just recently, one of the major constraints that has to do with the extension of a hold or the time that it takes has to do with the inertial measurement unit, the pre-alignment of that for flight. That is the constraint which originally said that we had only about 50 minutes left remaining in the hold while we were in this particular hold. We have heard from Houston that the platform appears to be so stable that it's possible we could go possibly beyond that without recycling to the T-minus 51 point in the count to begin that pre-flight alignment once again. In Houston and here at the Kennedy Space Center, they're continuing to work that software problem to determine whether or not we'll be able to go ahead with the launch this morning. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
We'll have to check on that.
Well, that's the situation. You were just brought up to date on it. If you're just joining us, this is a special edition of the Today program. I have some old friends here in new places. John Chancellor of NBC News, of course, and astronaut Joe Kerwin, veteran of the Skylab mission. We've been here for more than an hour now, watching the Columbia out on the launch pad, and the situation first developed with the computer that you just heard described there about what was going on. They've got a problem with the backup computer, the software, that is the instructions and the memories. They're not listening to two of the primary computers, so they've dumped it out, and they're reloading it with a fresh set, not a new set, but a fresh set of the same software, and seeing if they can then get it to link up so it will listen as it should to what is going on. They did have a little problem with the fuel cell early on as well. That now has been resolved satisfactorily. We are in a hold. The hold was originally 50 minutes, but we were just told that they think that they may be able to expand that. So as they work on the computer problem, the scheduled launch has passed, and we're waiting to see when we may get still another launch. Let's talk for just a moment with Joe Kerwin about the prospects if this does not go off today, or if it doesn't go off by noon today.
Yeah, they have approximately a 6-hour window. We've held at a good time because they didn't start the power units yet, and we don't have a refueling problem there. I would expect if they didn't go today, they'd easily be able to get ready to go tomorrow.
Would it be tomorrow, or would we have to wait 48 hours, Joe?
Until Sunday.
There's been a lot of talk about that.
I am not certain,
Yeah.
okay?
But I
But
think
based on where we are in the countdown, I think they could go tomorrow.
Now, if you look at your screen there, that large tank, the tallest structure, has 1.5 million pounds of liquid hydrogen and oxygen in it. What happens to that if they have to wait 48 hours?
Once again, I'm not certain, and I wish Launch Control would tell us they may very well have to detank and retank.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
And that's of highly volatile stuff. That's the biggest bomb in the world today that's non-nuclear, sitting on that pad.
And not a terribly thick skin to that as well. That breaks up, it's detached and breaks up. We have standing by outside Bob Zell in a VIP area, and he's there with astronaut Jim Lovell, who can talk a little bit about what it's like to be sitting up there working on these kinds of problems at this hour. Bob?
Hello again, Tom. Jim Lovell is a veteran of 4 missions.
One of the determining factors in the ability of us to hold is the inertial measurement units. We are coming to the point approximately 20 minutes from now when we would have to go back and realign them, and that requires going back, at least for that, to the T-minus 51 minute part. However, most of the systems would be held at the T-minus 20 minute point, and that is what the hold clock would say. At the present time, we are dumping the general purpose computers and having them analyzed at Houston. This is Shuttle Launch Control.
Okay.
That's the voice of Hugh Harris, and he's been describing what is going on here. We're now 20 minutes past the scheduled launch time because they have a problem with the computers on board, specifically with the backup computer not matching up with the 4 primary computers. This is a computer-driven space age that we live in, as we well know, and this is very important. They don't want to send it up there without that backup computer working. What they're doing is getting a reading from the managers here at Kennedy as to whether or not they can do without 75 seconds worth of data, so they can tie up the lines and send it all down to Houston and take a look at it there where they have the experts. Is that a fair summation, Joe Kerwin, our astronaut?
That's what's going on.
Yeah, but there's one other thing, Tom, which you also heard, and that is that they're running out of time a little bit in terms of some navigational aids. And in specifically the inertial measurement unit, if they've only got about 18 more minutes of that particular gadget being aligned so that it can help in the navigation. Stop me if I'm wrong, Joe. And
Well, John, I heard Neil Hutchinson in Houston say that the inertial measurement units were looking so good that he could probably give them an extension on that time.
But if they are going to get an extension, and they'll know at half past the hour now.
Yes, sir.
If they can't get that extension, they'll have to go back to 50 minutes before launch in terms of the countdown.
Or 51, I guess.
Or 51.
Yeah.
And to realign the inertial measurement unit. So you get complexities within complexities on these things.
All right, let us talk just for a moment and bring you up to date why it's important that they get a launch today before noon. One of the reasons it's important, they don't want to land in California after dark. I mean, we're dealing with the time zones in this country. They're due to land in California about midday out there, and if they get too delayed here past noon Eastern time, then they would have an after dark landing in California, and they don't want it because they're coming in just like this, a dead stick landing, and we'll be talking more about the landing procedure.
It's quiet out there now.
Okay, we have Bill Lynch standing by at the White House, John, and President Reagan has sent a message to these astronauts today. Bill?
Well, Tom, the president got up about 15 minutes before the initial scheduled launch time, and like millions of other Americans, he's watching this coverage on television and probably has his fingers crossed that the Columbia does get off on time. Last night, he sent a good luck message to astronauts John Young and Robert Crippen, wishing them a safe and successful mission. Through you, he said, we all feel as giants once again. Once again, we feel the surge of pride that comes from knowing we are the first and we are the best, and we are so because we are free. He told the astronauts that as they hurtle from Earth in a craft unlike any other ever constructed, they will do so in a feat of American technology and American will. Yesterday, Vice President Bush telephoned astronauts Young and Crippen, wishing them a bon voyage. And tomorrow, if all goes well, he will speak to them in orbit. The astronauts will be in orbit, not the Vice President, on a radio hookup from here at the White House. And on Sunday, he plans to be in Houston to meet them when they return to the Kennedy Space Center there. The president, meanwhile, continues to make a good recovery, and his doctors this morning are laying good odds that he'll be released from the hospital tomorrow. Tom?
Thanks, Bill. Kennedy Space Center here, Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. This is a special edition of the Today program, and
this is Shuttle Launch Control.
What he just said was that they're continuing to watch the computer problem, and that analysis is still going on. They are now expressing what Hugh Harris at Launch Control called some concern about the inertial measurement unit, which is part of the navigational system here. They may have to realign that no decision has been made. If they do have to realign it, it pushes the countdown back even further. The hold has gone on now for 35 minutes because of these various problems. Most of them are solved, although the people who have been watching the fuel cells, remember it was fuel cell number 3 that gave them some difficulties, feel that there may be too much pressure on those fuel cells, and they've switched back at least to partial power from the ground. We trust you understand all that. I think I do, but I'm not absolutely certain. That's what they just told us, though, from Launch Control.
What about that, Joe Kerwin? What does that mean, that they've just hooked it back up to a ground system instead of having
They're
it?
simply now sharing ground power. They turn the ground power back on at a slightly higher voltage, and it takes over some of the load.
Does that mean that there's still a problem in fuel cell number 3, do you think?
No, not at all. I think this is purely a precaution.
As long as we're in the hold, you might as well let the ground do some
Might
of
as
the work
well
as well.
relieve the fuel cells of some of the burden. Yeah, that's not a problem.
But the computer still may be, and one of the things that I find interesting about this is that you have to ask Houston.
Yeah. Well, we're going to go to Houston right now, where we have Roy Neal standing by, and he has some information for us on this computer situation. Roy?
Well, not so much that. We're like you, Tom, listening very carefully here to Neil Hutchinson and all of his flight controllers as they work this problem over. I notice Hugh Harris there at the Cape talking about dumping data. Well, that means they're feeding data through to the people here. And all of the back rooms, the support rooms, are extremely busy right now, studying, looking this thing over. Particularly their concern at the moment being the inertial measurement unit. That's one of the black boxes on board filled with gyros. When you get it back there at the Cape, you might ask Joe Kerwin how you realign those gyros, because they're in a black box down inside the spacecraft, and the astronauts are up on the flight deck, of which I have a simulator here, but the flight deck does the controlling, and it'll be interesting to find out. Well, right now, the biggest question seems to be, however, still that backup computer, and whether or not it's accepting commands at this writing, we don't know. So we're listening very carefully for Launch Control at the Cape and for Houston's Mission Control to tell us exactly what it is there. And by the way, something else I'd like to mention. At this writing, there is no danger to those astronauts on the pad. Everything's going fine except for minor glitches. But there is another escape system. It's called slide-by-wire. And Tom, that's another question for Joe Kerwin, if you'd like to ask him. I'd like him to describe the slide-by-wire if they had to use it.
Okay, we'll do that, Roy. We're going to have a couple of questions for him. First of all, about that backup computer. That's purely a precautionary measure, one of many, of course, on this flight. You were just saying a moment ago, the irony is they may never use it.
That's right. We should go through a nominal flight on the prime computers and never ask the backup to take over control. But it's still a very important backup, because all 4 of the prime computers have the same identical set of instructions in them. We're not worried about a hardware problem. What we're worried about is a fault in the instructions, an erroneous set of instructions, which would then be common to all 4 of the prime computers and wipe them all out at one time. That's what the backup's for. It has a totally different set of software in it.
Right. So Roy was just talking about if they had to evacuate in a hurry while they were still on the pad. They do have a kind of fancy getaway system up there. Fancy, but at the same time primal.
Yes, which we've never had to use for real, fortunately. Of course, they'd have to get the white room back out, get the hatch open, get the crew across the tunnel onto the launch structure, across to the other side of that, and then they have a little wheeled cart that hangs on a couple of wires. You get in and pull the handle, and off you go and slide down. Must be a mile from the pad.
And then if things were really in tough shape, that they can get into a kind of armored personnel carrier and drive their way out of there.
That's right, yeah. But they probably just want to hunker down there.
That's in the worst possible case scenario, which we don't expect.
We have no
Control at T-minus 9 minutes and holding. We have been holding now for approximately 45 minutes and have approximately 16 minutes remaining in the time before we would have to realign the IMUs. We have been told by Houston that they're extremely stable, and we may be able to extend the hold slightly beyond what is normally contemplated. At the present time, we have not had a reading as to how we're
on the BFS problem. One suspect is a new configuration of BFS.
We're listening now to Houston, where they are talking about what may be the possible problem that caused the backup software to look as though it might not be satisfactory. But at the present time, we do not have a determination as to how long we may hold at this particular point. There has to be a decision in the near future as to whether to go back to a different point in the countdown. But at the present time, we're at T-minus 9 minutes and holding. This is Shuttle Launch Control. We have a number of
Hugh Harris from the Kennedy Space Center.
The propellants which are on board are not a constraint. We can hold at the flight mass as long as necessary. One of the main constraints is that we have to go back and do a pre-flight alignment of the inertial measurement unit. This occurs at the T-minus 51 point in the countdown, and this can be done without recycling all of the other elements back that far. The other elements of the launch vehicle and the ground support can stay at the T-minus 20-minute point. One of the main constraints as far as picking a launch time is the crew rules. The doctors have determined that the crew should not remain in a horizontal position in their seats on the pad for longer than 6 hours, and do not want to have them awake between the time that they're awakened and the time they have their first sleep period in space longer than 20 hours. At the present time, this is not a serious threat to recycling the countdown. However, it is one thing which has to be considered. At the present time, we are standing by for an estimate of when we can target the countdown for. We have not had a resolution from Houston or from here at the Kennedy Space Center of whether or not the backup flight software is a proper configuration or not. It has been determined that one portion of that computer program has never been run before in the simulations which have been conducted, and that is presently being looked at very hard. It is being put through the facilities in Houston, which determine whether or not the computer programs are valid or not. So we're standing by here for a determination of a target liftoff time and also for a resolution of what needs to be done on the backup flight programs. We're at T-minus 20 minutes and holding. This is shuttle launch control. And holding. At the present time, the launch team and launch director George Page are discussing the beginning of the inertial measurement unit pre-alignment. Once we start the pre-alignment, the earliest that the launch could take place would be approximately 81 minutes from that point. If we should not be able to go today, it probably would be necessary to recycle until at least Sunday. One of the constraints in the preparation of the vehicle calls for a 24-hour conditioning period for the liquid hydrogen tank once we have filled it with hydrogen and then drained it again.
A target launch time is set for 8:20 Mountain Standard Time, but with 12 minutes left to go on the count, the backup computer was not functioning properly, so they discontinued the countdown and delayed launch for Sunday, April 12th in the morning, which happens to be the 20th anniversary of man in space.
Tells. Neither. Scott Freeman recording, April 12th, Sunday, 1981. Relaunch of Space Shuttle Columbia. T0 set for 5 a.m. Mountain Standard Time.
Minutes, 30 seconds, mark and counting. Pilot Bob Crippen has signified the auxiliary power units are ready to be started. T-minus 5 minutes, 15 seconds, and counting. Coming up on the 5-minute point, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. T-minus 5 minutes and counting. We have had a go for APU start. APU start is in work. This is a start sequence. The final chase plane is taken off from Patrick Air Force Base. T-minus 4 minutes, 42 seconds, and counting. T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds, and counting.
Once we get the APU start, we have a total of 12 minutes of hydrazine supply for running the APUs prior to a liftoff. Everything going very smoothly in this count. The APU start is complete. T-minus 4 minutes, 10 seconds, and counting. As preparation for main engine ignition, the main fuel valve heaters have been turned off. T-minus 3 minutes, 57 seconds, and counting. The final helium purge on the shuttle main engine has been started in preparation for engine start. The liquid oxygen replenish system has been turned off in preparation for pressurization of the tanks for the launch. T-minus 3 minutes, 35 seconds, and counting. The Elevon speed brake and rudder are being moved through a pre-programmed pattern to assure that they'll be ready for use in flight. T-minus 3 minutes, 20 seconds. It has been armed. The purges of the main engine as we prepare for ignition. T-minus 1 minute, 10 seconds, and counting. Liquid hydrogen tank is at flight pressure. Mark and counting. The firing system for the sound suppression water will be armed in just a couple seconds from now. It has been armed. T-minus 45 seconds and counting. T-minus 40 seconds and counting. The development flight instrumentation recorders are on. T-minus 35 seconds. We're just a few seconds away from switching to the redundant sense sequencer. T-minus 27 seconds. We have gone for redundant set sequencer start. T-minus 20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15, 14, 13, T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. We've gone for main engine start. We have main engine start. Off of America's first space shuttle. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Columbia, Houston, your go at throttle up. Roger, go at throttle up. Roger, Columbia, on the nice ride. You're lofting a little bit. You'll probably be slightly high at staging.
1 minute 45 seconds coming up on go, no, go.
Columbia, your negative seats.
That call up says that Columbia, the altitude is too high for ejection seat use.
Columbia, your go for SRB SEP.
2 minutes 4 seconds, standing by for SRB SEP confirmation.
Roger on the SEP, Columbia.
Mark, 2 minutes 20 seconds, confirm solid rocket booster SEP.
That means those two rockets on either side of the main fuel tank have separated from the spacecraft right on schedule.
2 minutes 30 seconds. On-board guidance is converging his program. Columbia is now steering for its precise window in space for main engine.
It's about 30 miles up in the air now, about 23 miles out over the Atlantic, and it is now traveling.
Altitude 42 nautical miles.
The solid rocket boosters have separated from the spacecraft right on target. It's about 30 miles in the air. It's about 23 miles down range, and the Space Shuttle is now traveling at about 3,500 miles an hour after a stunning launch.
3 minutes. Young and Crippen really moving out now. Velocity now reading 6,200 feet per second.
Everything going
Mark, 3 minutes 15 seconds. Columbia now 51 nautical miles in altitude, 66 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 6,500 feet per second.
It's being powered now by the liquid oxygen and
3 minutes
hydrogen
30
in the external
seconds.
tank.
Columbia now 55 nautical miles in altitude, 78 nautical miles
It's
downrange.
burning that up at a very rapid rate because it's going to be through with that in about another 5 minutes, right?
Mark, 3 minutes 40 seconds. Standing by for a return status check and mission control by Flight Director Neil Hutchinson. Columbia given a green to continue.
For those of us...
3 minutes 55 seconds, standing by for a press to MECO, which says Columbia should lose one engine.
Columbia, stand by, press to MECO.
Columbia continues flying forward, coming up on negative return.
For MECO.
That was a little early. That indicates above normal engine performance. They're getting all the boost they need.
Mark, 4 minutes 8.
What they're doing, MECO, is a main engine cutoff is what they're talking about.
That's right. That's right.
Negative return.
Okay, negative return means they can
Mark, 4 minutes
no longer
25.
come back and
5 seconds
land
with that.
at Cape Kennedy.
So if something happened, the next thing would be Rota in Spain.
And it would have to take two engines to get
Columbia
into
now
that
committed to
situation.
space travel. Young and Crippen can no longer turn around and return to the launch site.
Columbia, Houston, we're showing both ohms PC transducers off scale high.
Mark, 4 minutes 45 seconds. The flash evaporator is activated on board to cool Columbia.
There's an enormous amount of heat generated there, and they've got an evaporator system that is working now, and later they'll shoot the heat out into space. We'll talk about that later on.
Why are the transducers off scale high?
I believe I heard John say in the cabin that they were off scale low, which indicates it's probably a sensor problem due to that launch vibration. Those are the fuel tank pressures for the orbital maneuvering engines that they'll use
Columbia now
after
75
cutoff.
nautical miles in altitude, 202 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 11,000 feet per second. A status check and mission control by Flight Director Neil Hutchinson.
Columbia, Houston, your go at 5:30. MECO, 8+34.
Right on.
Mark, 5 minutes 40 seconds. That call up from Capcom Brandon Stein says that Columbia's trajectory, navigation, and engine performance look good.
Columbia, reading you loud and clear.
Okay, you're clear, a little weak. Mark, 5 minutes 55 seconds.
Columbia, we just switched over Bermuda. Voice should be getting better here in a second.
Okay, that's good. 6 minutes. Columbia now 76 nautical miles in altitude, 280 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 13,000 feet per second.
And you'll be able to hear their voices from Bermuda before long from the tracking station there.
Columbia, Houston, could we have the cryo heaters, please? And Columbia, your single engine rota.
means
6
now they
minutes,
can raise
25
two
seconds.
engines and still land at rotor.
From Capcom Brandenstein says
But
that
all three are still
two-engine
running.
failure occurred. Columbia is capable of an emergency landing at Rotor Naval Air Station, Spain. Mark 6 minutes, 40 seconds. Columbia pitching over now, diving to increase velocity, decrease altitude, giving Columbia her most favorable attitude. Columbia now 72 nautical miles in altitude, 373 nautical miles downrange. Velocity now reading 16,400 feet per second.
That's right on the money, isn't it, Joe?
Right on the money.
Yeah.
And the cutoff time is
Standing
within
by
2
for
seconds.
single
of,
engine
program.
Prestamico call up from Capcom Brandenstein.
So a perfect launch and a perfect mission so far.
So far, so good.
Absolutely thrilling to see that thing go.
Single engine,
Yeah.
press for Miko.
Okay, now they can lose 2 engines
20
and
seconds.
still get to
That
orbit.
report says that Young and Crippen can achieve orbital insertion even if 2 engines go out.
And in about 1
Mark
minute, the
7
main
minutes,
engine will
30
cut off.
seconds. Columbia 67 nautical miles in altitude, 485
Very
nautical miles
shortly,
downrange.
it'll start to
G-force
throttle
is building
back to
for Young and
prevent
Crippen now up to
overstressing the
3Gs.
aircraft as the fuel tanks get lighter and lighter.
Mark 7 minutes, 45 seconds.
Should be happening now.
Columbia's main engine slowly
back to
being
60%.
throttled back now. Should be
Not
throttled
quite.
at
They'll
65%.
gradually throttle back
6
to maintain
seconds before
3
main engine
Gs, a
cutoff.
certain
Status check
acceleration.
the Control center.
And then just before cutoff, they'll throttle back to 65% prep for
Mark 8
shutdown.
minutes.
Which is coming up
4
in
seconds.
30 seconds from now.
Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 606 nautical miles downrange. Mark 8 minutes, 15 seconds. Columbia now 63 nautical miles in altitude, 650 nautical miles downrange. Standing by now for main engine cutoff.
Miko 25670 up at 220 feet per second.
Right on. Right on.
Roger, Columbia.
Cut off the main engines means that they can
Confirmed
now just
shutdown.
heading
Columbia, the Gemini
for their
Dual
planned
is now
orbit.
in Space, not yet in orbit.
To get enough of a kick in the seat of the pants to get them up there.
Separation.
Now they'll separate from the external tank 20 seconds after cutoff.
Okay, we got SEP.
That's
They've got
it.
They've got it. Rates were low. SEP was on
Roger, we
time.
confirm the SEP, Columbia.
And 2 minutes from cutoff, they will
9 minutes,
burn
3
the orbital maneuvering
seconds.
engines.
Confirm external tank separation. Columbia now performing an evasive maneuver.
Now John is at the
Moving
controls. We're
below
moving
and
it out of
beyond
the...
and translating
John
the
is
north
moving it
external
away.
tank. Young
That's
should see
right.
it moving
John
away out
on that
his
is.
window.
And as far as we're concerned here on Earth, it's upside down as of the moment.
They're heads down. Of course, they don't
Yeah.
feel that.
I know
They're-
that.
They're weightless now, and they're not in orbit yet. The external tank is going to re-enter in the Indian Ocean and break up. And that's what the orbiter would do if they don't do the series of 2 burns that are coming up. But they got 3
9
ways
minutes,
to
40
go.
seconds. Go, no go status
I figure
check.
that
Mission
the,
control for the first open
External
burn.
tank will break up over the Indian Ocean, and it has what they call a footprint. That is, a track that will go, it'll be about 100 miles long and 60 miles wide. They don't expect it to hit on land anywhere. That they pretty well...
Well, it left on time. I mean, it broke
Yeah.
away on time, so that means it won't hit Australia, which was the main worry.
That's right.
That's right.
One burn attitude.
Now they're going to have their first orbital burn. They're going to turn on the orbital maneuver subsystem.
Moving Columbia forward and higher on her flight path, placing Columbia in orbit.
These are 2 little other engines that are in the back of the Columbia as well. And we'll be back checking on all of this. Everything going extremely well for the Columbia Space Shuttle on this, its historic first launch, going very well indeed. We'll have continuing coverage of it all right after this.
Nautical miles downrange.
NBC's coverage of the first Space Shuttle.
Great thunderous liftoff. 4.5 million pounds thrown upward. That was the weight at liftoff.
102 on the left and 101 on the right.
Most of that, of course, in fuel.
Roger, Columbia. They're looking good to us.
A status check in the control center.
Now, moving into OMS burn. Leo Krupp, exactly what does that mean?
They have to light off the OMS engines for the first time now to increase the velocity, the orbital velocity.
40 seconds to LOS. Configure LOS. You're looking good burning over the hill. We'll see you at Madrid.
This burn will put us into 130 by 58 nautical mile elliptical orbit, and later on we'll do another OMS 2 burn to circularize that at 130 circular.
When is the next danger point?
Coming up here very shortly, 2 minutes after tank separation here, we should be doing this OMS 1 burn. Should be doing it right about now.
It is underway. And the astronauts right now are doing exactly what, Leo?
Well, they had to set up for this burn. They had to put some switches in the right position. They had to program the computer, maneuver to the proper attitude so that when this thrust comes on, it will increase their velocity and put them into this 130 by 58 nautical mile orbit.
We've had loss of signal with Columbia. Through Bermuda, the next station to acquire will be Madrid.
Unfortunately, we lose communications before the burn is complete, so when they get to Madrid, we'll be able to find out if the burn was good.
Still receiving data, however, in the control center. Right at shutdown, they saw the, right at loss of signal, they saw the shutdown of the OMS.
Keep in mind that the first orbital engine firing, or burn, is to get the orbital height. And the second orbital engine firing is to make the orbit circular. And the crew will leave their seats for the first time as the first orbit is completed. That would be about an hour and 15 minutes into the flight. Now we're told, yes, the spacecraft is in orbit.
Good. Burn was successful.
So the first burn is successful. The orbital engine firing burn into orbital height successful. Absolutely flawless launch into orbit.
I can say that probably Bob and Crippen are so excited now they just can't hardly stand it. They even made the comment during launch that the view was great out those windows.
As the spacecraft reaches into orbit and prepares to make its first circular orbit of the Earth, we'll say that our CBS News coverage of the flight, and we can now say flight of spacecraft Columbia, will continue after this pause for station identification.
Yes, Jules?
Duration of the burn, 1 minute 27 seconds. Resulting orbit, apogee 132 nautical miles, perigee 57 nautical miles. So Columbia is now in orbit, not yet her desirable orbit. At the start of OMS 1, Columbia was about 400 feet below, 150 feet in front, and 350 feet north of the external tank. Also, Columbia weighed 4.5 million pounds at launch. She now weighs about 214,000 pounds.
So they're hitting all the markers, aren't they, Joker?
Not quite.
This is Shuttle Control with Houston.
If they're at 132 miles up now in apogee, they were supposed to be 172 miles.
No, not yet.
No.
The first one was
They're
130.
speaking nautical miles, and your chart is in statute miles, which accounts for the the difference.
The first one was, as I saw it listed, was at 130 and 57
They're
perigee.
targeted for a 130-mile nautical mile circular orbit, right? After the second burn. And that is 170 statute miles.
130, and that's right.
Well, then they are on the money.
Yep,
They are
right on the money. Okay, Bob Bazell standing down in the press site, and he's with a couple of people who have been here watching all of this, a couple of Californians, I think. Bob?
True, and I must say, I've been preparing for this thing for months, and it was so overwhelming that I can't even put it into words. You think you can be cynical about things, but the emotion of this. Our Miami bureau chief, Don Brown, was sitting next to me. Tears were coming down his eyes, and he's a pretty tough guy. We have with me two guys, Steve Spielberg, the filmmaker, Governor Jerry Brown of California. Governor, what did you think?
It was just great. Just watching that thing just take off, it made me feel like we got a lot of strength in this country, and I hope we take some heart from that and start expanding our commitment to space. It's real important for our spirit as well as our economy.
Mr. Spielberg, what did you think when you saw that?
Well, it sort of puts everything that we do in movies in quick diminishing perspective. It was a remarkable experience. It was a remarkable experience.
I think it was for everybody out here. Thank you very much. And John?
Everything going well. The spaceship is on its way, and we'll be back with more coverage after this. Astronaut Crippen told Houston just a moment or two ago, he said, "I'm sorry, I could not see Gibraltar. I was too darn busy." He may get another chance to see quite a lot.
Just got to go from Houston for OMS 2, which is the orbital maneuvering system that will put them into their final orbit. That should be coming up in about 24 minutes or so everything continues to go as well as it is.
And Jim Cummins has a report for us from here at the Kennedy Space Center. John, at the moment the rockets fired, there was a...
Bravo to 2. And we're 13 seconds from LOS. Configure LOS. We'll see you at Indy at 36 plus 00.
That LOS means loss of signal. They're leaving one area where they can be heard and heading for another.
The flash evaporator is very important because that's the cooling system that's working there now, and that thing heats up. If you think you have trouble with your car, there are all the systems going on a hot summer day. Imagine what they're going through up there. And later on, we'll be talking about this. They're going to open up the cargo doors, and they've got some evaporators in there as well, radiators that throw all the radiators throw all the heat out into space, and that'll be the next big dramatic thing after they hit orbit with OMS-2. That will come in about an hour and 10 minutes or so.
And we will show you that on television.
Because we expect to get live television pictures at that time.
We'll be back with more coverage after this. That's a live picture from 100 miles up in space, give or take a few miles. Happening right now, 1.5 hours after they left the pad here at Cape Canaveral.
Okay, that's a picture of inside the payload bay now, looking up and aft toward the doors. The doors are closed in that picture.
Now, these doors are reversed. The starboard door...
See the little piece of debris floating up through the cargo bay?
So over 100 miles up, going 17,600 miles an hour, but it's very quiet up there.
We'd like to verify that the DFI is in high sample.
What's that mean, Joe?
The DFI is special instrumentation, and they just want it moded to high sample rates so it'll record all this activity.
We show all of the bulkhead latches closed now, and they're now going up the center line.
Okay.
Latching up the center line now.
This is not terribly dramatic in terms of a picture, but it is critical to this mission and critical to the future of the space shuttle.
Right, they're verifying the ability to relatch the doors, and only when they've done that will they be given a go to reopen the doors, both of them.
Among other things, they want to make sure that they can close them tightly when they come back out of orbit 2 days from now from Edwards.
The doors are very much part of the structural strength of the orbiter, and you can't re-enter with them closed.
The DFI is in high sample, please. Fabrication, data, we double check. Roger. Position of the switch is in high sample. I've got a gray talkback. It just sounds like it's still running. Roger, we see it still running, Grip. Okay, I'm going to go to low sample on it. Roger, we'd like to cycle at the low sample. Okay, we're in low sample. And I've still got a gray talkback.
Joe.
Roger, we show it still continues to record. We'll take a look at it.
Crippen and Young are now floating around, or are they using those the suction cup shoes?
I suspect they are floating around. They have not yet doffed their ejection escape suits. They haven't had time to put on the suction shoes. It'll be very interesting when they get back to talk about how well they worked and whether they were needed at all.
Crippen. And Columbia, for the CDR, we'd like to know if your TV picture is somewhat washed out or if you got a good clear one. How about the best picture you get? Roger.
It looks very washed out from here.
One half of it does. It looks now as if they have two cameras, each with half the screen.
Television is very important up there, not just for our purposes, but because that's how they inspect each of the hinges and determine if there are any problems.
When we opened up that right door, first when we opened up the center line, we noticed no movement at all in the door. When I opened up the 4.5 bulkheads, it maybe bounced up half an inch, and door opened up nice and smooth, came back. It looked like we had come through about position alpha, and it came on down all the way to getting it closed. This is Shuttle Control, Houston. 1 hour and 40 minutes mission elapsed time. We show Bob Crippen again unlatching the doors, going down the center line now.
Roger, Crip, we copied the first part of that, and then we went into a handover, but we copied that everything was right down the pike on the closing.
That's perfect.
Joe, what we're looking at, that dark diagonal line, is that where the two doors come together, do you suppose?
As best I can tell from that picture, that's correct. Yes, and when Crip said position alpha, he meant that when they closed the door, the position of the latch was exactly on the nominal point for completing the latch.
Where it should have been.
Right where it should have been. That's good news.
So what we're looking at is, in effect, the roof of the cargo bay.
That's right.
Figure out what the problem is.
That's right.
I'm sorry, Dan, say that one again.
Roger, on that DFI recorder, we'd like it to stop until we figure out what the problem is.
Okay, we're stopped.
Does that mean they're just getting a bad picture, Joe?
The sides can reach.
John Young is
the
our
tail of the orbiter.
Yeah. A very good picture.
You're looking right outside now. And that's looking at the aft bulkhead, right?
Wait a minute, quiet. Tiles are missing.
I see one full square and looks like a few little triangular shapes that are missing, and we're trying to put that on TV right now.
Roger, Crip, we can see that good.
Those are the heat-resistant tiles that are designed to withstand the heat of re-entry.
And Columbia, Houston, we have a state vector coming your way.
Yes, sir.
That is not a part of the spacecraft that is going to get the maximum heat. Losing a tile there would not be as difficult as losing it in some other part.
That's correct, because it's on the upper surface of the spacecraft and not the one that will see the maximum heat. They will, of course, evaluate that in detail.
Roger.
Will you only know if tiles are missing by visual, by looking at the places where they may be missing, or do you have a computer read on that as well?
The only direct way is visual, both this good visual and the photographs taken during launch, of course.
The only direct way is the wrong way, if the heat starts to come through for a missing tile.
Through the mission, they will be able to estimate from temperature readouts along the bottom surface of the orbiter whether it's responding to sunlight correctly, and we'll get a clue as to whether it's properly protected.
And on later missions, they'll be able to go outside and repair tiles, but they don't have that facility now.
That's correct.
From what we can see of both wings, tops and lead edges, though, all those are fully intact.
That's good.
Okay, and the reds are coming out.
So
Okay.
the tops of the wings are intact as far as the tiles are concerned.
Right. More critical and more securely fastened. They're going to raise the radiators up now to get better heat rejection, and that will
report from
secure that system and make it go for
the missing tiles. Also, he reported
And Columbia, we're 30 seconds from LOS. We'll see you at the Indy at 2+12.
And we'll see you there.
And the radiator.
There's the radiator out.
Yeah, the radiator's up, and that big white box in the middle of the payload bay is our friendly DFI.
That's throwing the heat from the Columbia out into outer space.
Tiles on the wings appear to be intact.
That's maybe the most important piece of news we've had this morning. Roy Neal is standing by in Houston. Roy?